Well, here, I won't have to introduce Dan Rather to you, but I don't think, will I, Dan? Everybody watches you.
Well, I don't assume that, but you're very kind, Joe.
No, don't you regard yourself as a superstar?
No.
Now, come on.
No. Sorry, I'm a
Cover
reporter.
of Time magazine, the $8 million man.
Well, first of all, don't believe everything you read. A lot of my creditors would like to believe that I make $8 million over 5 years.
That's not true.
It is not true.
Okay.
Widely believed it may be, true it is not.
Yeah.
I'm a line reporter. Now, I recognize that in the current atmosphere of television, that sometimes, if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on your point of view, you may wind up on a cover of Time magazine. You may wind up talking about the conventions in People magazine. Part of that is a result of what I think is an overemphasis on what's called the star system. The star system has lapped over into television. We shouldn't be surprised. It was there in radio. Edward R. Murrow was a star. He was a superstar. He was a megastar. The goal for all of us that do what I try to do, and that is place our emphasis, our first emphasis, our only professional emphasis on journalism, is to keep the star system from consuming us. And part of the reason when you say, well, you're a star, come on now, you're going to cover Time magazine, you've got to be a star. Part of the reason I always come back and say, wait a minute, no, that's not what I'm about. Partly it's to remind me that that's not what I'm about. That's not what I want to do with my life. It's also to try to remind the audience that on my better days, where my concentration is, it's not thinking about what magazine cover there is, but thinking about the story I'm on.
Except I know Cronkite has said many times through the years that he finds himself a part of any story he ever tries to cover. And I'm sure the same happens with you. And I've seen you in Miami, and I've seen what happens. You do have that ineffable, that inexplicable star thing about you, which is more attractive than many of the other correspondents, and which has, I think, contributed to you being named as a successor to Cronkite. So it's very difficult. I appreciate you being humble enough to draw back from it. But I have some concerns about that in this industry.
So do I, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think that when you become a part of the story, and television is guilty of this, you distort the story itself. Now, how are we going to deal with that in the future?
Well, not very well if the past is prologue. I expect we won't deal with it very well. It isn't always the case. You and I perhaps can agree to disagree about one thing. It isn't always the case that when one becomes a part of the story that you distort the story. That frequently is the case, far too often the case. But to deal with your question about how are we going to deal with that in the future, one is to remind ourselves that it is a problem, and that it can be one hell of a problem. That doesn't mean the problem goes away. That doesn't mean we always deal with it as we should. But if we keep reminding ourselves that it's a problem, then we can perhaps scale back its excesses. The second thing is to try to educate the audience, those people there, as to what it is we're trying to do, what it is we think we're about, what our goals and aspirations are. Not that we always achieve them, but for any working reporter, the goal is to cover the story, not to be a part of the story insofar as you can avoid doing that.
But now, Dan, let me interrupt you. It seemed to me that in a Republican convention, the networks were manipulated handily by the Ford, Reagan people at one time or another, really to one end, to have an impact on Jerry Ford being the running mate of Ronald Reagan. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree or disagree, and I'll tell you why. As with most reporters who are covering a story, I don't have time and don't want to take the time to analyze the philosophical aspects of the story. Most of the time, I'm a fellow who's just seen an accident, and I got a deadline to meet, and that's the way it was at the conventions. Now, this much I know, that neither Gerald Ford nor Ronald Reagan was eager for television or anyone in the press to know about their negotiations before a certain time. Now, after, let us say, 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, we're talking now about Eastern time, after 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, they may have been. But, and this is the point, we found out about it early in the morning. Jerry Ford, by his own testimony, was absolutely astonished that we found out about it. He said, well, how did we find out about it? Obviously, we talked to somebody who was in the room when the negotiations were going on. Now, I don't call that being manipulated. Clearly understand that we are far too often manipulated by politicians, by Iranians, by just about everybody else. It's part of the reason I say people have to read in addition to watch television. Anybody who depends completely on television for news cannot be well informed.
No,
I don't think you can be well informed and not watch television.
That's right.
But you have to read as well. But we are manipulated. We're manipulated far too often. but we're not manipulated all the time, every second of every day, every hour, and we certainly weren't the Republican convention. We broke the story of what was going on behind the scenes. Frequently, politicians like to get the deal set, or if the deal isn't going to be set, they like to come out and announce to their own advantage why it wasn't set. In this case, we broke through with the story. Hey, they're in the back room wheeling and dealing about a co-presidency. Now, that's a heck of a story by anybody's standards. It wasn't a story that they wanted out at the time we got it out. To that extent, we were not manipulated.
Very quickly, how do you feel right now, knowing that you're going to have to step into Walter Cronkite's place and obviously, hopefully, keep the ratings where they are? Do you feel that pressure building on you personally?
Well, honestly, yes. I mean, how could one not feel some pressure? But 2 points. One, I don't feel pressure because I have to succeed Walter Cronkite. There isn't going to be another Walter Cronkite, and I don't feel that, knowing that the network feels that. I have to be as good a Dan Rather as I can possibly be. That's a certain form of pressure. It's pressure that I welcome, frankly. I welcome any pressure that can lead me to get the best out of myself, and I hope this will lead me to get the best out of myself. Secondly, as to the ratings, we care about our circulation, which is, after all, what ratings are. So do newspapers, so does anybody in journalism. Sure. However, we are not nearly as consumed with thoughts about ratings as it may be believed from the outside. Yes, we care about them. They are not the most important thing in our minds. The most important thing in my mind going into this new role, and it's something that I learned from Cronkite, that Cronkite in turn learned from Edward R. Murrow, and that is the number one thing is to be concerned about the quality of our coverage. If we have the best coverage, I can say to you in all candor and honesty, and don't get the ratings. We have the best coverage and don't get the ratings. I can walk away from it and feel very good. I cannot feel good if we get the ratings and I know in my gut, in my insides, that we didn't have the best coverage.
Well, of course, that's we all feel that way. We never know, and I think we are, being in the business, we sometimes blur the difference between going after the ratings and going after the quality coverage. And I don't know how. The only thing that bothers me, and I'm as critical of television and all the junk that's on, as the audience of this show knows, as anybody, but I do get a little irritated sometimes at the sanctimonious attitude of the print media in general of television, because who's kidding who? They do the same thing. They worry about subscriptions and circulation. And I think there's a lot of cheap shots taken at television news. Now, as far as the television entertainment, every cheap shot is worth taking. It's so much terrible stuff on.
Who is this band?
Yeah, I don't work at television. Well, no, I think this show has always been successful because we've never tried to hype anything or deal with the audience in any other than a sophisticated way. And there's a lot of people want that desperately in this country.
I couldn't agree more. Matter of fact, I can say amen to all of that.
Yeah. So what are you doing right now? Explain your life to me right now. Here you are. You've been named the successor to the man in television. What are you doing in this lame duck period, you might say?
Well, we prefer to call it a transition period.
Okay, transition.
I'm keeping my concentration on 60 Minutes.
Right.
That's my major responsibility until Walter Cronkite decides to work a little less. And incidentally, the time for that is strictly up to him. When he decides he wants to do it, that's when he does it. There's no pressure to do it before he's ready to do it. And I'm quite happy about that. I love 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes is the best job I've ever had. I could very well do 60 Minutes for another 5 years, another 10 years if they'd have me. I like it. And to answer your question, my concentration right now is getting the best stories on 60 Minutes I can possibly do. I don't think about the other, except on occasions such as this when people ask intelligent questions about it.
Well, do you still find yourself surprised at the success of 60 Minutes?
Astounded.
Given our understanding what television has been.
Absolutely astonished.
Yeah.
I couldn't be more surprised if a headless horseman came riding through this room than I am at the success, the audience acceptance of 60 Minutes. Because, as is the case with you, I've been in news quite a long time and been in television a fair length of time. It was always considered practically carved in stone that a news broadcast, a news and public affairs broadcast, might do reasonably well, no chance ever to lead the ratings, particularly in prime time. I'm not sure I understand why it has happened. I am very happy that it's happened. I'm particularly happy because I hope that it convinces our management, that is the CBS management, and for that matter, the management of local stations around the country, that news and public affairs programming can win. And by win, I mean win not only in terms of quality, but win in terms of public acceptance, in terms of circulation.
Well, 60 Minutes, a montage, is already doing that, so I guess we've proved a point already. Dan Rather, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. I enjoyed it.
We'll be right back.